With 10.8 on top of us, we've gotten a chance to look at the brand new Korean builds to bring you guys the best information and best builds for you to abuse on this patch. And this time we've got 11 new things for you to get into your games. So let's not waste any time, make sure you smash that like button, destroy the sub button, and let's jump right in. First off, topping the list is going to be a new Traven build. So let's list it out. Of course, you're an AD carry, so you're probably going to want to take Flash Heal unless you're up against some crazy CC mage bot lane, in which case Cleanse is an amazing option. Rune-wise, the build takes Hail of Blades, Cheap Shot, Eyeball Collection, Relentless Hunter, Presence of Mind, and Bloodline, with attack speed, adaptive, and armor in your minor runes. This whole build is designed to function around extremely quick, short trades while you're holding your double axes. The burst that this brings to the table is absolutely ridiculous, especially when you pair it with the items that people have been bringing. This build goes Muramana on Draven, with Berserker Greaves, Edge of Night, Yumu's Mortal Reminder, and Duskblade to follow those up. The whole point is to completely dismantle anybody on the enemy team who doesn't have armor, and even if they do, you always have the option of buying a Lord Dominik's for guards for additional armor penetration. Does the enemy team have a Nami who built Athene's and Moby Boots? Well, I guess sushi's on the dinner table. Is the enemy Khazix being really dumb, buying Moby Boots and full lethality and trying to kill you? Well, with your Edge of Night brand bug spray, you can send that man straight to the fountain. Did the enemy Kaisa just tag you with a W from halfway across the map and is now ulting at you? Well, thanks to the fact that you have literally everything in your kit built towards bursting somebody out, you can instantly slap the void skin off of her and win the fight. Hopefully it's pretty clear as to why this build is being played in the first place and why it's so strong, but for now, let's move on to our second champion, and that's going to be Camille. And you might be thinking this is going to be a top lane, but no, it's actually Camille jungle. Being a jungler, you will of course take Flash and Smite, and if you don't take Smite, well, that's a real shame. Better luck next champion select, I guess. But beyond that, the runes that you want to take are actually pretty self-explanatory. Press the attack is amazing on Camille and absolutely demolishes people with the extra burst that it brings combined with her Q true damage. Triumph, Alacrity, and Coup de Grace back this up and allow you to burst people out and fight them even longer. From there, Magical Footwear and Cosmic Insight allow you to get free boots and roam on people even more and have just a little bit extra cooldown reduction for Camille's very impactful abilities to come back off cooldown. Attack speed, adaptive, and armor will round out your minor runes, and the start of the build is actually pretty simple. You want to get warriors and usually a red smite because Camille's 3.5 mile long E really allows her to gap close pretty easily compared to most other champions. On top of that, she's also got her ulti. But don't worry, because if for some reason you're having any problems gap closing onto your opponents, this build's got you covered because you're gonna take Moby Boots, because that's exactly what you need. Realistically here, Camille doesn't really need defensive boots that much. She already has a great defensive passive that gives her a huge shield. Sure, if the enemy's all AD, then hey, buy tabbies. They'd be dumb not to. But if you just want to roam and repeatedly kill and chase down your opponents, Moby Boots is an amazing boot option. After that though, the build has no surprises. You're going to want to pick up a Triforce as an amazing item on Camille and synergizes with her in every single way in stat, and then follow that up with a Asterix, and then a GA, and then a Death Dance to round it all out, and you'll have the trifecta, or I guess the quadfecta of bruiser items. I'm not even sure that's a thing. Let me confirm with my agent. Hey, is that a thing? Apparently he's unavailable, so let's just roll with it. Anyways, that wraps up Camille, so let's move on to our next champion, and that's going to be Khazix. Being the second jungler on this list, of course you're going to want to take Flash and Smite. They are the two quintessential summoner spells for pretty much every jungler. But the rune choice here is a head scratcher to say the least. You're going to want to take Phase Rush, and from there Nimbus Cloak, Absolute Focus, and Gathering Storm round out the rest of the sorcery tree with Ravenous Hunter and Eyeball Collection, adaptive, and armor in your minor runes. Khazix is one of those champions who actually clears very healthily, and whenever he fights people, he also tends to remain very healthy. This is why Absolute Focus is an excellent rune choice for him, and pairing it with Gathering Storm for even more attack damage scaling is really powerful. The secondary runes are pretty obvious, but let's talk about that Phase Rush and also by extension, the Nimbus Cloak. Khazix's main issue is that if you ever jump in and you don't manage to instantaneously get a reset, or it's the early game, before you ever evolve your wings, you can often be caught in bad positions, even though it looked like it was a good fight to jump in on. Having Phase Rush and Nimbus Cloak gives you insane mobility. Anytime you jump into a fight, you're pretty much guaranteed to proc the Phase Rush, and if your opponent tries to get away from you, you can then chase them without having to waste more resources thanks to the movement speed. But if all of a sudden all 5 enemy champions on the enemy team jump out of a bush randomly, even though you were already fighting one of them and therefore have somehow managed to end up with 6 people on the enemy team, you can hit that hotkey to start the gas on your iTunes playlist and sprint it out of there faster than you've ever sprinted before, even faster than when your parents yell out your full name. And at the end of the day, let's be real here, Khazix doesn't really need a damage rune. The champ has absurd scaling, and isolation is an incredibly powerful thing for him. Whenever his Q hits somebody who's isolated, it's already doing upwards of 900 damage on its own. As far as items go for this build though, it's pretty simple. Warriors, Mobies, Duskblade, Yumu's, Edge of Night, and Lord Dominic's. This is pretty standard on Khazix. Going full lethality with a tad bit of armor penetration at the very end if you need it is pretty standard. Sometimes you might see people go Black Cleaver, but you don't really need to go this if your only goal is trying to burst out squishies. Having wrapped up Khazix, we're going to take one step back and go to another AD carry, and this time we're going to talk about Caitlyn. There's been a lot of back and forth about what's best on this champion, how do you win the lane the hardest, and it really seems like it's finally settled, so we're going to talk about it one more time and go over all the new runes and the new item build that people are doing to make sure that you're abusing her to her highest potential. Obviously, you're an AD carry, so you're going to be taking Flash Heal, or like I said before, Cleanse is also a good option. From there, Caitlyn likes to take Fleet Footwork for extra sustain in lane. She doesn't really need too much extra damage, and most of the time, she relies on headshotting people who step in her traps or using her headshot passive just from her auto attacks in order to garner a lot of damage. Since you're trying to commit to the full lane bully playstyle, you're going to go Overheal, Bloodline, Coup de Grace, Nimbus Cloak, and Absolute Focus with attack speed, adaptive, and armor in your minor runes to round everything out. This will give you really great sustain and damage mitigation in lane, assuming that you play it properly, and the Coup de Grace damage is great for headshotting people who are low health and using your ultimate to ace people at the very end when they're already low health. Ideally, this build keeps you very healthy, and that's why you take Absolute Focus. You should be getting that bonus AD pretty much all the time unless you really make a mistake, and Nimbus Cloak helps you stay safe with the extra movement speed that you get from summoner spell usage. Caitlyn is often able to abuse other enemy laners using her extremely high range and traps in order to pressure people out. Usually with the help of support, she can really keep enemies under tower and pressure them constantly. However, you can make it even more annoying by rushing Stormrazor, which is what most people are doing right now, and they're doing it with great success. Berserker Greaves follow that up for even more attack speed, and then not an IE, actually a rapid fire cannon second to really commit to that big headshot damage that you can get by garnering the energized effects from Fleet Footwork, Stormrazor, and Rapid Fire all together. Then you could get an IE and really make your big crits hurt. After that, Static Shiv for even more energized stuff, and then Mortal Reminder to round it all out to make sure that you can actually do damage to opponents who build armor. This build is really strong when played well, however it's not the simplest thing to play, and it definitely puts a lot of pressure on you to not mess up as you need to be pressuring your opponents constantly. Knowing how to keep track of the enemy jungler, knowing how to manage the wave, how to poke at your opponents effectively, and more are all very important skills to mastering Caitlyn in this style. To find more informative content about these sort of skills that you need in order to play champions like this properly, make sure you go check out our website, GameLeap.com. We have videos a lot like this one where we can go over a lot of different topics and give you guys exactly what you need to improve and win in your games. Maybe you need some more instruction on how to properly manage a wave and pressure your opponents in lane. Well, we have macro guides that can teach you exactly that, and everything that we have is done by challenger level players. But let's say that the macro guides aren't really your thing and you're trying to pick up a new champion that you can really learn and put to the test. Well, we have champion guides too. Just about everything that you could ever need when it comes to League is there, so make sure you go check it out to win your games. Moving on from Caitlyn, we're going to do a little bit of a switcheroo here and start talking about Set. And once again, the switcheroo comes in where we're talking about him. He's gonna be in the jungle here, taking Flash Smite of course, but the runes are really once again the question mark in this build. Phase Rush is the look here with Nimbus Cloak, Celerity and Water Walking, Hex Flash and Time Warp Tonic wrapping up the rest of the runes, and then attack speed, adaptive, and armor in the minor runes to round everything out. So as you can see, this whole build is just speed. There is nothing more for this build. It just wants to see you, look at you, and say, oh, you look like you'd be nice to punch, and then do that for way longer than you would ever want it to happen. And even if you manage to get away to the rest of your team, congratulations, you just played right into his hand. The Phase Rush movement speed is activated, and he's just gonna sprint straight into the middle of everybody, get a beautiful 5-man E, and then your entire team gets wiped by the rest of his teammates. This is of course all assuming that he's unbound his R key and no longer has a need for it. This build is strong and, well, if nothing else, fast. And the items here don't even try to fool you. You're going Blue Smite Cinderhulk because of course you need that movement speed, and from there you're going Swifties cause you need that movement speed. Oh, I'm sorry, what was that? You thought the movement speed was done? I don't know about you, but it doesn't look like he's hit the movement speed cap yet, so I'm pretty sure you're going Deadman second, and then after that you can pick up a Stone Plate for the big tanky health boost to give yourself an insane W true damage blast. From there, Warmogs will give you even more health, and Adaptive Helm can round everything out to give yourself some magic resist. If you really find yourself taking a ton of magic damage, you could of course swap the Warmogs for the Adaptive Helm and get it last instead. For all of you guys out there who happen to have friends who play Zilean, you should definitely play Set with Zilean in this build. It's hilariously stupid. But of course, let's ride the Hyper Omega movement speed train and move on to our next champion, which is going to be Swain. And here we're talking about Swain support. And this one really made me do a double take. Swain support players in Korea are taking Flash Ignite, but they're also taking Conqueror with Presence of Mind, Tenacity, Coup de Grace, Perfect Timing, Cosmic Insight, and Double Adaptive with Armor in their minor runes to round out the full rune page. The entire purpose of this just seems to be committing to the level 6 Swain play and really going for those long extended fights and taking advantage of all of the adaptive stats that Conqueror gives you. The healing is really just a bonus, he already has quite a bit on his own, but that's not to say that the extra healing isn't wanted, because it's definitely useful. Going Precision Primary does solve a lot of problems though, as Presence of Mind really alleviates any mana problems that Swain could ever have, and the Tenacity is really nice, just to make sure that you can get out of some sticky situations and activate your R when you need it. Perfect Timing is great for the cooldown reduction, and of course, the stopwatch builds straight into your Zhonya's. And of course, speaking about Zhonya's, let's go over the item build. Swain support wants to grab a Spell Thieves. He just pokes a lot, of course that's what he wants, and ability power is exactly what you need. And from there, rushing Sorcerer Shoes to make sure that you have the mobility to be able to pick people off with your E seems to be the play. From there, Liandry's is an amazing item as it gives you the burn, health, and the extra damage ramp up that you need in order to function really heavily in fights. After that, your Zhonya's will come into play there, as you can finally use the golden mode to really garner a lot of healing and power in fights, as well as buy time to get your Conqueror fully stacked. After that, Morello's into Rabadon will get you scaling really heavily into the later stages of the game, as well as being an absolute nuisance to people who rely on healing. All in all, there really aren't many downsides to this build, and it's extremely strong assuming that you can survive the lane. Of course, there are people who will be able to best you in the lane, and you are technically weak to people who can heal a lot, but if you manage to catch people out even just twice in a row, you can absolutely take over the control of a lane just from that alone. After all, nobody can heal back over, 800 damage just from you alone, not to mention how hard your AD carry can hit them in the meantime. But as we step away from Swain, we move into a fire, quite literally, as we talk about Brand support. Funnily enough, Brand support is actually a counter pick to Swain support, and he is also a very effective pick against a lot of beefy champions because he has the ability to really chunk them out using his passive, as well as the 3-hit ability passive proc that does a huge burst of damage. This is of course a double-edged sword though, as Brand is really immobile, and if he misses his Q stun, he probably dies in most fights if you're in a bad spot. So because of that, it's very risky to play him. However, when he is pulled off correctly, he is disgusting. This whole build entirely revolves around buying Brand enough time to get all of his abilities off in an appropriate manner, and potentially even a second round, as you will inevitably die, as you are a target for many diving champions and just any champion in general. They don't want to have to deal with all of your slows, your burning, and annoyances. This is why Brand support is taking Flash Exhaust right now in Korea, and from there the runes are Comet, Nimbus Cloak, Transcendence, Scorch, Presence of Mind, and Coup de Grace, with double adaptive and armor to round out the minor runes. This really stresses your poke in lane, as you can simply E somebody and almost guaranteed get a Comet proc unless they were not standing still and actively moving in a direction, because they simply don't have enough movement speed in the early stages of the game. But not only that, Nimbus Cloak will give you additional movement speed to get out of sticky situations, and the Exhaust will prolong your life greatly. From there, Transcendence allows you to scale, and Scorch helps your poke in lane. Presence of Mind helps all of your mana problems as you don't build a single mana item, and Coup de Grace is of course amazing for dealing with people who end up getting low from all your burning and spell damage, and then blow up thanks to your 3-hit passive. While it's definitely no phase rush Brand, it's definitely very effective and more annoying in lane. And considering that a lot of champions that are being played right now are mostly enchanters or some of the squishier, less engaged style supports, it's still fine to take this. Spell Thieves is going to be your first item, and then follow that up with Swifties for the extra mobility to make sure that you're keeping yourself safe and you still have the ability to catch people out. After that, Liandry's is a very standard item, and Brand also has a built-in slow on his ultimate as long as it's hitting the right targets. This is why the build tends to forego Rylai's and instead decides to go for a Zhonya's next, and after that a Banshee's Veil to make sure that you can never get caught out in a bad scenario. And well, maybe never is a strong word, but it's definitely trying hard to not get caught. After that, Void Staff can finish out the build as the magic penetration is necessary to scale into the later stages of the game. The next champion we're going to be looking at is ChoGath, and specifically ChoGath bot lane played with a fasting Senna. This is just a very sort of niche thing to do. However, fasting Senna is getting very popular and is more popular than any other form of her. And because of that, this is definitely a reasonable thing for you to try out. However, we would probably not recommend doing it unless you're duo Q with your allied bot laner. Summoner spell wise, you'd be taking Flash and Exhaust. And so far this seems pretty normal. You could just be playing a sort of ChoGath support. But after that, it is the combination of the ChoGath taking Glacial Augment as well as the Senna having Glacial Augment that makes this lane an absolute nightmare. For the rest of the inspiration tree, you're going to want to take Magical Footwear, Biscuits for sustain in lane, Approach Velocity for the obvious synergy with all of your CC, Cheap Shot for the obvious synergy with all of your CC, and Ingenious Hunter for your item synergy, and then Adaptive, and Armor to round out the minor runes. All it takes is one auto attack from Senna, and whoever she auto attacked will not be able to move, cast spells, or do basically anything but auto attack for the next give or take 5 to 7 seconds. The Senna auto attack will lead into a ChoGath Q, and then the ChoGath Q will lead into a Senna W, and then that Senna W also guarantees that a ChoGath W will land, and from there, Glacial Augment is already off of cooldown again, and the ChoGath is also in range for Glacial Augment, and this is all before you've even bought a single item. This is just torturous to play against. For items, you're going to be building GLP and Spooky Ghosts, as I'm sure you've probably already guessed, given that you're going Glacial Augment ChoGath. However, from there, you're going to buy Tabbies or Merc Treads depending on the enemy team. You're going to build defensively for the most part here on out. You rely on your ulti for health scaling early on, and buy a Morellos to make sure that you have anti-healing to annoy your opponents more, and then buy a Stone Plate for the extra defense and the amazing resistances that it will give, and a Zanya rounds out your build. All in all, this is a nightmare to play against, but of course requires you to have a Senna and a ChoGath in the bot lane, which won't happen every game unless of course you're duoed. Now the last 3 champions that we're going to cover here are really unpopular because they're either very niche, or just extremely difficult, or potentially just bad. But the fact that these builds are performing in Korean high elo clearly shows that there's hope for them in other areas. We will go over all of these, however, just know that these are definitely not on the level of the rest of the builds that we've already covered in this video. There's just more complications to them in one way or another. First off, let's talk about Corki, and this is specifically referring to Corki mid lane. You'll be taking Flash TP, as Corki almost always does, as he wants to remain a lane pressuring champion for the most part of the game. He mostly just wants to farm and poke at his opponent and allow himself to scale into the later stages of the game, and this build is no different. However, you will definitely notice that there are some different runes and items here. You're going to want to take Lethal Tempo, and then grab Presence of Mind with Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Biscuits, and Time Warp Tonic with Attack Speed, Adaptive, and Armor in your minor runes to round it all out. This is specifically focused at giving Corki incredible extended fight damage, with the Lethal Tempo Attack Speed really carrying his DPS, and the Presence of Mind always keeping him topped off in terms of his mana. And speaking of mana, your first item with this build is going to be a Manamune, and then a Sword Shoes with a Triforce second, and then an Infinity Edge, Phantom Dancer, and Death's Dance. This is very different to the previous builds that Corki has gone. In the past, he's gone Triforce Rush first basically every single season for like the past 8 seasons. Honestly, I started in season 2, so I can't report on anything before then, I don't actually know. But the combination of this items functions a lot like Ezreal would in the bottom lane, except of course Corki can be played mid. And that's not to say that Ezreal couldn't be played mid, but that's semantics. Let's get back to Corki here. First of all, the Muramana upgrade gives Corki's already strong burst an absolutely ridiculous buffer that just erases people from existence the moment that you see them. And for the people that actually manage to stick around, Lethal Tempo just causes him to melt through them like butter. This build strengthens Corki's burst, it strengthens his DPS, and it also strengthens his survivability in the form of the Phantom Dancer and the Death Stance. You don't have to rely on a rapid fire cannon, and you don't have to go something like a Gunblade, which may seem ridiculous and overkill, and most of the time was. The extra staggered damage and resistances from Death Dance play a huge part, as well as the shield from Phantom Dancer. We've seen some really incredible stats from the players who are trying this build and actually perfecting it, and hopefully this is going to be the next big thing to abuse on this patch for the rest of its duration. Now we've still got 2 builds to go here. First, we're going to look at Thalia. To say Thalia is unpopular would be an understatement for sure. However, right now, Thalia bot lane in Korea is performing insanely well. They take Flash Heal or Flash Cleanse if the enemy has a lot of CC. Rune-wise, they take Dark Harvest, which is nothing new, that's what she took in the jungle previously, and Cheap Shot as well, with Eyeball Collection, Ravenous Hunter, and Presence of Mind and Coup de Grace are the mainstays here, and as you can see that there's a lot of inspiration drawn from the jungle, with Double Adaptive and Armor coming in hot in the bottom lane. Of course, the big difference is that you don't have the Smite Summoner spell when you're laning as Thalia, and so a lot of players go Switcheroos Rush to make sure that they have the mobility to catch people out with their Ws, and then in order to augment that, they pick up a GLP second, even though they're not running Glacial Augment, to give themselves a long range slow that they can combo to make sure that all of their skill shots land. Liandry's would be the next pickup, as Thalia is very much a DPS champion as much as she is a burst one, with Morello's following that up to augment her damage even further. And then Rabadon's and Void Staff would round out the build and allow you to be an absolute menace who scales very quickly as they play in the bottom lane and get all the farm and resources to themselves, and Thalia is not a champion who relies on levels, so that's exactly what she wants to worry about. This build is very strong, but Thalia is a difficult champion to pilot, and even beyond that, she's a difficult champion for allies to play around. Most people don't understand how important her being away from her worked ground is to make sure that she's getting 5 thrown Qs. Of course, there's more complexity to it than that, but that's just the start. It definitely doesn't help if your allies are making it harder for you to do as much damage as you possibly can. And in that same vein, let's cover the last champion here, which is going to be Aurelion Sol. Aurelion Sol is historically a champion that basically only one-tricks play. However, we are seeing some players do a completely new build that skips an item that most people have thought is absolutely integral to Aurelion Sol's kit. These guys aren't buying Rylai's anymore at all. They'll take Flash Ignite and go Phase Rush for their rune with Mana Flow, Celerity, Water Walking, Presence of Mind, Tenacity, and Attack Speed, Adaptive, and Armor in the minor runes to round everything out. This gives them a very solid base of movement speed, mobility, and roaming power, as well as mana sustain and the ability to escape from sticky situations. Most people would take Conqueror and instead rely on the W movement speed that they get after it's over in order to maneuver around, but here it's the exact opposite. You use Phase Rush to maneuver around, and this allows for a bit more creativity in terms of what you do with your positioning and how your stars align. Item-wise, we did already mention that these guys don't buy Rylai's at all, however they still do buy Rod of Ages and of course Switcheroos, you're a magic damage champion, but from there they go straight to Morellonomicon and then grab Azania's, Rabadon, and Void Staff to round out their build completely. This gives them a ton of damage and the ability to go golden in the middle of a fight if they need to, while also being extremely annoying because they have the Morellonomicon anti-healing to annoy all of the people who have items like Death Stance and other lifesteal items. Something to mention here is that if the enemy team had no way to really get any healing or was only going to build very little of it, you could instead go Liandry's for more damage in an extended fight, as well as burn on high health targets. But with Aurelion Sol wrapping everything up, that's all the champions that we have to cover for this patch in terms of the best Korean builds that we could find. To learn more about the champions that we covered in this video, make sure you go check out our website, GameLeap.com. We have guides on them and we're always working on making more and better content with our challenger level content creators to bring you guys all the guides that you could possibly need, whether it be micro guides, champion specific guides, macro guides, or whatever else. We have the chance to go way more in depth on those videos on the website than we can here, and this allows us to teach you guys way more and help you learn and improve in order to win all of your games. If you made it this far, thanks for watching the whole video. What do you guys think about the new build? Some of these are definitely strange, and honestly, Muramana seems to be creeping its way up onto a few champions, and who knows, maybe we'll see some more in the future. Anyways, as always, my name is Ace Windstorm, and I will see you all later.